Hello, everybody. You are live with Rancho Community Church in Temecula, California. Today, we will be speaking with a married couple who is actually somewhat new to Rancho and is going to share with us their thoughts and opinions and their whole perspective on Black History Month. So I'm really excited for you guys to get to hear from them today. I'm going to go ahead and try to request them. Hi, Rachel. Just saw that you popped on. Let's see. Hi, thank you for being here. For everyone who just hopped on, you are live with Rancho Community Church in Temecula, California. Today we get to sit down with the lectors. They are somewhat new to Rancho, and they are going to sit down and share with us their perspective on Black History Month, and I can't wait for you to hear from them. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Oops, here, I see a notification. Yay. Hi, everyone. Yay. Okay, I think you're here. Hello. Hi.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Doing really well. How are you, Haley?
Good. It's so good to see you and to meet you in person. It's wonderful to get to talk to you again.
Great to be here.
Oh, thank you. So would you like me to tell everyone who you are, or would you like me to introduce you? Because we just met last night.
We did.
Yeah.
I would love to hear how you would want to introduce us.
Sure. Okay. Well, to everyone who is on live, thank you for being here. You're with Rancho Community Church in Temecula, California. Today we get to sit down with, and I'm going to butcher your name, Lyman and Stevie Lectors. And they are somewhat new to Rancho, and they are going to share with us their perspective on Black History Month. Is that about right?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, so you are somewhat new to the area. Where did you move from?
We moved here in August from the Washington, D.C. area. We had lived there for the last 10 years, moving there from Seattle, Washington. So we actually moved here to be near our grandbabies, our son and daughter-in-law, and our two grandbabies. We all moved at the same time. They moved from Atlanta, and we moved from D.C. and kind of met up here. So we've been here since August, and actually got introduced to Rancho Community Church through Denise Wilson, who, as it so happened, was our realtor. It may have seemed serendipitous, but clearly it was a God thing. And so she introduced us to Rancho. We got to visit last summer, and we've been coming and fellowshipping here since August.
And if anyone doesn't know who Denise Wilson is, she's on the board of elders at Rancho. She is, if you get the privilege to meet her, I always describe her as like the light of God shines through her. Like, she is just a positive ray of Jesus and Christianity as a whole. And she's also a realtor here in the area. Wonderful. So I don't want to jump too far ahead. Why is Black History Month so important for people?
Well, I'll start, and then let my lovely bride come behind me and correct anything that I messed up.
Okay.
But for me, so I've been in the justice space for a long time. I work in human services and child welfare and youth justice. And the importance of Black History Month there's a number of points about it. First, it's really an opportunity to celebrate and elevate the exceptionalism of Black Americans in our nation. There's a narrative in our country, a long-standing narrative that is one of exceptionalism, but it's often incomplete. Yeah. And so Black History Month and its evolution, really starting back in the 1930s, its evolution over now 90 plus years, has been an opportunity to bring that narrative to a more complete frame. I think the other part of the narrative that Black History Month helps us with is that the story, the American story of exceptionalism, is not binary. The exceptionalism is real. It's correct, but it is also incomplete. There's bad things that have happened in our country, and part of Black History Month allows us to engage in those conversations, to reveal some of the bad stuff in our past that is as real as the exceptionalism, and talk about them in a healthy and whole way. And I frequently say that it's important for us to understand history, because history reveals to us the structures and systems that get put in place that maintain disparities and oppression in many facets. With respect to Black History Month, it's the experience of our Black brothers and sisters in this country, that the history then allows us to see how we've gotten where we are today, and the things that we've made progress on, but the things that still need work. So I frequently say that history is not the past; it's simply the prologue, and allows us to talk about things with clarity and understanding.
And I was educated in America like the rest of us, and there are a lot of things that are excluded. The image that came to me was, it's like puzzling, which we call putting together puzzles. If you do the work of putting together, especially a bigger puzzle, and then get to the end and have a piece or two missing, there's a frustration, there's a gap, there's a hole in it, and that's what it feels like as a brown girl trying to feel like I belong. And I grew up in a community where there were my brother and sister and I were the only African-American kids in the school, in K through 12. So just let's say being a middle schooler, there's just gaps, and you're trying to find your spot, find where you fit. I just discovered, I think this week, it's Black History Month, I'm learning, that Charles Harrison invented the plastic version of Zoomaster. I'm like, everybody my age played with, Viewmaster. I'm like, how did I not know that it was a brown person? And he was an engineer with Sears, and he was a contractor because they didn't hire Black people. And then he became like the first employee, and he invented like 700 things, including the plastic rolling garbage can. So stuff we use every day. It's important to know, hey, people that look like me had a part in that. So when we're in our educational system, we can aspire higher. All kids.
Okay.
Let me just add, like Stevie just described, it allows us to learn some things we may not have learned in our school experience or in our past or in our lifetimes, for those of us that are, beyond school age. And for me, it's significantly beyond school age. So it allows us to learn some new things, but it also allows us to unlearn some things that may not be true. And so I think that's a way for us to lean into Black History Month, especially as Christians, where truth is centered to our values. And so making sure that we're clear about that.
I love how you both keep describing it as filling in the gaps, or like pieces missing, because we're all learning. I think it's a really healthy way to live life, is just always being a student and understanding that there's always something to learn, but that it isn't just about, it's about so many different facets. But something that just was brought to my attention was it is important. Of course it's important, but it is part of the whole significance of Black History Month, is, like you said, elevating voices, or filling in the history books, or giving so the people that have been missing from our history a place. And also maybe because sometimes we don't even know that they're missing, unless we know, we can't do better. So it's like being able to bring I don't know, it's so important to speak about. And I think
we're all products of our environment and our upbringing, right, and our learning. And so I just encourage people to lean in with a sense of learning, exploring, resisting especially for our white brothers and sisters, resisting the notion that this is about blame and shame. This is about learning, experiencing something new, leaning in with a sense of responsibility, leaning in with even the Christian focus of embracing, being in relationship with people, and getting to know folks. In fact, you and I, when we the three of us, when we talked last night, we talked about proximity, right? And the need to be in relationship with people, and understanding history, filling in gaps allows us to deepen our relationships across racial lines, across cultural lines. And so it's really important to think about it as from a responsibility frame. It's not about blame and shame. It's not about, and we said this last night too, it's not about calling people out for things that they don't know. It's inviting people in, calling people into this knowledge, to this opportunity to learn and embrace the exceptionalism of a large group of people in our country who have been left out.
I like that you said that we're a product of our environment. I had a moment, this was like 3 or 4 years ago, where I went through something with my kids. And I haven't shared this with you. I probably wouldn't share it on the internet. But it was like I realized in that moment that I didn't have any Black friends. It was like, and then I started to peel back the layers. Like, why is that? Because I am always trying to, diversity is super important to me. Why aren't they in my inner circle? Like, why do I have to go to like my sister's sister-in-law in order to like get help with this problem? Like I wanted help with something that I was dealing with my kids. And so I think it's just, we've always, I don't even know if we should be talking, but it's like, we've always tried to live in an affordable area near a Christian church. And I don't understand why we're just surrounded by white people. Anyway,
Well,
anyway.
Let me follow that up, because I think it's important to reveal that kind of thing, because we don't talk about those things. We don't talk about why things are missing from our lives, or there are gaps, or why we don't have any friends of a certain background. And so being willing to explore that question is really important. Not using it as a defense mechanism, not seeing it as some kind of deficit, but exploring that and figuring out then how to fill those gaps as well. So it's not like we can't create opportunities to meet other people, to be in proximity with other people. And I would say that that's a fundamental responsibility of the church, as Christ called us to be in relationship, to be in fellowship, and to love our neighbors. And he did not have any kind of exclusive notion about who our neighbors were, who our neighbors are. They're all God's children. We're all God's children. So I think don't shy. Sorry, I'm not trying to coach you or counsel you, but I just encourage people not to shy away from those questions, and to really lean in and not feel like it's a deficit focus, or you're going to get put on blast because your experience is different.
And any relationship requires intentionality and time and shared experiences. And the less people of color that might naturally be in your neighborhood just requires a little more intentionality. The other part about relationship is Black people, or people of color, or women, or whoever's missing from history. In this case, we're talking about Black History Month.
Yes.
We're not always missing from history. Just the lens is a negative lens a lot of times, which I think is worse than not being there at all. So it's, when I'm in a relationship with someone, if I thought this group of people, or people in that part of town, or people in that part of the world did a certain thing because that's what I heard all the time, then I meet somebody and they shatter the stereotype and the thing that I've heard all the time. It's revelatory. It's like getting glasses. It's seeing a clear image. And I think that's what God's love would allow us to do in relationships. Is it's like being at the eye doctor with one or two. It's like, just, hey, let's fix the lenses. Let's keep adjusting and see who we can find. And a smile goes a long way. I've talked to most anybody just by a smile. So just being friendly opens doors for us. And as we're intentional just to be, I saw a t-shirt that said, humankind, be both. So if we just live like that, we also get opportunities to encounter people and be of service to humanity.
Absolutely. I think that's where proximity came in for me. Like that's there. I feel like it's the solution to everything. Like when I talk to anyone, and not just race, but also disability, any sort of difference that you're not familiar with, getting close to that helps. I mean, with understanding, then I don't want to say there's like fear, but it's the lack of understanding that makes you not as close, I guess.
Can I follow that 1 second, Haley? Because I think one of the things that happens is that fear is misconstrued, or actually discomfort is misconstrued for fear. And so I think that's something that all of us have to learn to get past, that we have to sit in some tension. We have to sit in some discomfort. And tension is actually healthy. Tension allows us to get to better solutions, to solve problems. But if we see that as this notion of discomfort being conflated with safety, with being unsafe, I think that really inhibits the conversation. So I encourage all people, especially people of faith, because our walk is one of discomfort. We're called to be in discomfort. We're called to die daily, right?
Yes.
Yeah, be peculiar, exactly, and to follow Christ's example, to pick up our cross and carry it, right? And so just be okay with the discomfort that comes from having these conversations, from learning, unlearning, from challenging what we think, from challenging what we know, from picking stuff off my shirt. So just excuse us.
No.
So just be okay with discomfort, and don't shy away because things get uncomfortable.
Something we talked about last night too was like prefacing conversations. Like if you know that they are a little bit uncomfortable, just saying like, this might be awkward, or this might be like a dumb question, but I just want to, I want to know, I want to learn. And that's why I feel like sometimes, well, the word ignorance, I feel like it has a negative connotation, especially when it comes to race, when really it's just the not knowing. And if we can push the discomfort to actually know, that's how we fight our own ignorance. And I feel like that's also what we were talking about, unlearning, because you are a product of like what you've already been taught. And as an adult, I feel like the best thing we can do is to not pretend like we know, and and just say, this is awkward, or I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to this, but I want to learn.
Yeah, totally.
There's a difference between ignorance and willful ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Being miseducated, or just not knowing, not being in a circle where you could have learned something, and being content to stay there, or being mean in not knowing.
The neat thing about it, so in the human services work that I'm in, we talk a lot about brain science. And it's really very interesting that the adult brain is incredibly malleable. We can continue to learn until we die. And so this notion that we learn what we learn until we get out of high school or get out of college, and then everything else is just kind of inertia, I think is something that we have to resist as well. And even in the Christian walk, we're constantly learning, adapting. We talk about the living word. We read the word over and over again, and it has different meaning and different contexts as we move through life. So embracing that malleability to that brain, I don't even know if that's the right word, but the brain can expand, it can grow, and we can learn new things as long as we're living. And so just encourage people again to lean into that learning, and not get stuck in old things, and that becomes then, as Stevie described, the willful ignorance. And so we want to resist that.
Yeah. So I mean that. Thank you for saying that. I think that does like bring a different perspective to just that word. Can be a little bit of a trigger for people, and that there is a difference, and it's not necessarily your fault until it's Maya Angelou who said, do your best until you know better, and then do better. And so if you're just constantly learning, it's
one of the other things I'll add this too, because Stevie says this all the time. I learned this from her years ago. Is that one thing I learned? No, we don't get stuck on thinking we've solved the problem. We need to continuously solve the problem. We need to continue to solve. We may come upon an answer that we think fits a situation or solves a particular problem, but we need to keep solving it, especially around issues of race and relationships and oppression. We need to continually solve this problem. So one of the things that we get stuck in is believing that we have resolved an answer or come up with an answer like, well, the civil rights movement happened, so everything's okay now. And the reality is that that's not true. We need to figure out how we celebrate progress, but be clear that we haven't gotten to success yet. So continually solving these problems. And I do believe that the church has a central role in that, in creating those solutions, in creating the solving these problems in our society, in our communities. Jesus came to save the oppressed. He came to set the oppressed free. Jesus came to heal, to make whole all of us, and those of us who call ourselves Christians, who follow Christ, need to embrace that mantle that Jesus demonstrated and taught.
Wow, amen. I did want to expand on, you said that you have been in the justice space for a while. And I know that you were in the justice space also, maybe in your church in DC.
Yeah.
What did you guys do when you were in DC?
Yeah. So we went to DC for a year, 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
That's a whole nother story. But I actually work I work for a national foundation, and our focus is on child welfare and serving children and families that are touched by our foster care systems. We went there, actually the church that we were part of in Seattle planted a church in DC, and we became part of that church as soon as we moved there. We were part of the pastoral team, so we served under our senior pastors, Michael and Heather Giroux. And part of what happened was right after the 2016 election, there was a split in the church. There was some division that came into the church. A large part of the church was celebrating President Trump's victory. A large part of the church was struggling with how that could be celebrated. And so we became part of a small group of people who said, wait a minute, we need to have a conversation about this. And so because there was no space to have a discussion in the church, everything was on social media, right? And so we facilitated, with the blessing of our pastors, we facilitated some conversations that really brought people together to be in relationship, to talk with each other. And in that, we centered Jesus. So it wasn't a right or left conversation. It was a centered conversation. It was like, okay, we're going to make sure that Jesus is in the middle of this, and we're going to talk about it from that perspective. So that became one of the early conversations we had around justice in the church, and making sure that it was biblical and connected. And we had it was fascinating to have those conversations, because every time we had one scheduled, it seemed like something the week before happened that allowed us to center that discussion and bring people in to talk about what had just happened. I was also
go through it together in like a wow.
To really, and it was there were no we didn't bring necessarily politics into the conversation. It wasn't a Republican Democrat conversation, but it was how it impacted people, how certain things impacted people, and their orientation around that. The other thing that I had an opportunity to be involved with was a organization called the DC Unity and Justice Fellowship, and we were a group of folks from different churches who really came together to educate the church around issues of justice. We did a lot of education. We brought in a lot of speakers, but also to create opportunities for spirit-led action that churches could participate in. So, whatever that meant, the church activated itself when there were times of trauma, times of things that the church needed to be part of. And one of the things that I've had a chance to talk with Pastor Rancho and Pastor Dion about is the thing that we learned to practice was we revived the spiritual practice of lament. And so we were able to bring that into both our church as a thing that we did on a regular basis, as well as what we did in the community through DC Unity and Justice Fellowship. So really elevating that practice as a way for us to lay things at the foot of the throne that we didn't understand, that we were mad about, we were hurt about, laying loss at the foot of the throne. So yes, we lamented some of the things that were part of the racial tension. Excuse me. We also lamented loss from the pandemic. We lamented job losses. I mean, it was the things that, you know, we needed to lay before God that we didn't understand, that we didn't have necessarily an answer to. Thanks.
How, what did that look like? So lament defined means to lay something before Jesus or before, but in a group setting, can you just describe like what that would look like?
Yeah, so most of what happened in the church was in the virtual space, because this was during the pandemic. This actually became a practice in the church post Ahmaud Arbery's murder and George Floyd's murder. And so we did it in the virtual space. Basically, it was explaining the practice of lament, explaining what it was and what it wasn't, and then having various leaders throughout the church lead specific prayers of lament around a particular issue or a particular situation, then creating space, excuse me, creating space for individuals to personally lament, either privately themselves, to have a few moments of personal prayer time, or doing some group prayers where people could collectively lament issues, lament loss, whatever it is that was on individuals' hearts to put before the throne. So the pastoral team participated, leaders in the church participated, and then with the DC Unity and Justice Fellowship, it was a collective of churches, so it's multiple churches, but essentially the same frame.
Sounds really powerful. Like all of the churches. I mean, in DC seems just massive for you to all come together like that.
Yeah.
Sounds really powerful.
It wasn't all of the DC churches,
No, of course.
But
still,
it was a handful of churches, but pretty wide impact, and then we had a pretty large gatherings across.
One way I talk about lament, and you can correct me if I'm wrong and write it on your calendar, that I think of it as, I write a lot of stuff and songs, but thinking of it like David, it sounds like a scattered hot mess. Lord, kill them. They're chasing me. They're after me. They're bugging me. I'm hurting. And Lord, you're sovereign. I trust you. So always coming to the end that we have to lay this at God's feet. You're sovereign, and right. We don't have all the answers. Jesus came to seek and save that which is lost. Sometimes it's hope. Sometimes it's mental clarity. Sometimes it's friendship. So he wants us to work in that same direction. And sometimes it's ugly in here, and sometimes it's ugly out here. And I think a lament is a way to say that in a safe space where this is to God. I'm not shooting this at anybody. Right. I mean, we might have things today lamenting, like, why do we care about this? Why would you care about that? That's not bothering me, or what? So being okay to say the things that don't sound right, like, Lord, kill them. We're not saying that, but David did. It's in the Bible, so there are things that we can take to God that might not make the most sense or might not sound the best, and God will use it to work in our hearts through the Holy Spirit and bring unity. He's going to get the glory, and it's going to be for his good, for our good, and for his glory.
Yeah, and just to remind folks too that the Bible, and I just saw a note on the screen that the Bible is full of examples of lament. Psalms is full of. And there's actually a book called Lamentations.
In the Bible.
In the Bible, yeah. So I'm sorry, this is in the Bible. Good catch, Haley. And then the truth is that, you know, one of Jesus' last words while he was on the cross was a lament, right? I mean, he asked God, you know, why are you doing this, right? And so why have you forsaken me? So that's an absolute lament. And I think it's a powerful way to come together collectively because, first of all, God's not confused by our pain. He knows that we get mad sometimes, and we sometimes get mad at him. And he's not confused and he's bigger than that. And so this is an opportunity for us to lean into actually how big our God is and how amazing he is and how we can rely on him. And as Stevie said, the last word is always, we trust you. We may not understand. We may not get it, but we trust you and we love you.
I read somewhere that prayer is a reminder that you are human. And I just think that is just, it reminded me of that when you were talking. It's like he said kill them because he's a imperfect human being, and we need God. And it's prayer is a reminder of that, I think. So what? Thank you for all of that. If you haven't, I'm definitely going to go back through and rewatch this because there's so much good stuff. What brought you guys to Rancho? So you said Denise Wilson introduced you to Rancho. Did you look at any other churches in the area when you guys had just first moved here, or was it? Go ahead.
Yeah, we did. We went and visited a number of churches. I think so. First is the orientation around justice. Mercy, justice, love. The orientation at Rancho is compelling to me. I think compelling to both of us, and that was a big reason that we continued to come back. We loved what we heard from Pastor Scott and the rest of the preaching team. We loved the framing of scripture and really the centering. I mean, it really for me was the centering of justice and what was being taught, what was being preached, and I believe that that's correct from Jesus' perspective. And so certainly the feeling being here, even though I know we're still, I don't know where we are with the pandemic, but it's still there's still some hesitancy, and we're still often masked up, but really feeling the love in the church. I mean, the fact that there's actually a justice pastor, that was like,
when
whoa.
we visited before we moved out here, buying a house sight unseen.
Oh man.
We visited here, and it happened to be a week that Dion was being interviewed by Pastor Scott. So it was a God thing.
I think
that didn't just happen of all the weeks that we were here. So
that's so good.
And the mission to say, I don't know that I have it memorized, but a community of friends. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Advancing the cause of Christ. I'll take that. Through mercy, justice, and love. These are winners. That's how we want to live. We're believers. So that's why we stay. Can't help it.
Centering it around Jesus, like you were talking.
Yeah. And I think I will say too that hearing Pastor Scott's heart, I mean, it's pretty vivid when he speaks, when he preaches. We're clear that this is a place that we can serve, right? That we can be part of the fellowship here, and whatever God calls us to do or is necessary, needed here at the church, we're all in to serve and be part of that.
Well, I mean, on behalf of everyone, we're glad that you're here too. The mercy, you're right. Mercy, justice, and love is hugely important, and it is in the mission statement. And I went back. We were talking last night about Pastor Scott had talked about justice. I think you guys might have been here already. The mercy, justice, love series that we had, it was about 3 months ago. And he just defined justice as ensuring the equal respect, dignity, opportunity, and protection that all people deserve. And he looked up at the screen and he said, if you don't understand justice, I can't help you. Like it is just, I mean, it's important to us because it was important to Jesus. Like he stood firmly with the oppressed. He also came to make the oppressed whole. So anyone who is pushed away by religion or politics or anything, those are the people he went for first, and the children. But
yeah, no, that's powerful. I think it's another, even that connects with our conversation about Black History Month, because justice in the world has been conflated with order, law and order, and so we need to center our orientation around what Jesus' notion of justice was. So yes, it is healing people. It is the lost and the oppressed, but it's also to make whole, to bring back together. I mean, Jesus brought justice to all of us by redeeming us back to God, right? That was making us whole, repairing that breach. And so I think that's part of the Christian orientation for us to consider, to lean into, and resist this notion that justice is somehow connected with law and order, or even with charity. I think it was St. Augustine. I'm not a biblical scholar, so don't get me wrong. But I think it was St. Augustine who said that charity is no substitute for justice. And so we need to be thoughtful about that, how we stand in the gap as Christians when we see those places of injustice. And there's a lot more to go into on that. But that is a place where I think the church has a huge opportunity. The church, the big C church, right, has a huge opportunity to be part of the solutions.
I don't think I've ever thought of it that way, that justice is usually law and order, because I feel like we do get that question often. What is a justice pastor? What does that mean? Because it could be that simple as, for each individual person, it's different, I'm sure, but I never even thought of it that way. As
well, we even call it the criminal justice system.
Yeah,
right. For the youth juvenile justice system, we have a Department of Justice that is really oriented around crime, right? And so that then makes the logical linkage to law and order, to how our legal system works. And I would say that for the church, for Christians, there's a different orientation towards justice, that we are about making whole, that we are about healing, setting free the oppressed. And so I do think that warrants a much deeper, much richer conversation.
Yeah.
But there's something to think about there. Well, and even to ask ourselves individually, what is our orientation towards justice? What do we think justice is? And then seeing how that matches up with what the Bible says.
Yeah. Wow. That's so good. When you spoke earlier, you said you had brought in speakers. I wrote this down because I wanted to ask. If we wanted to bring in, and I'm not in the authority to do this, so I can't ask the speaker to come. But just if we were looking to, where would we even start? Like, what would be a good, profession, or someone that would be good to bring in to speak on justice? Because I guess a pastor would be, right? But is there any other, who did you guys bring in when you were in DC? Was it local?
Yeah. So I don't know about specific speakers. I think there's topics to embrace. I think that there's certainly conversations that are happening now here at Rancho with the Racial Reconciliation Group, reading and discussing The Color of Compromise, which is a really wonderful, it's a survey of the kind of history of the church's role in our past, and all the way from pre-slavery to slavery to current day. And I think it's a really good analysis, and an opportunity to learn and figure out what direction we want to go in. It depends upon the topic. I mean, I think that there's absolute conversations to have with our community. What's going on in the community? How do we invite law enforcement in to talk about this? I'm sure that we have officers in our congregation. What is their orientation around justice, and what do they think about it? It's never an either or question. We have a tendency as people in this country to think in binaries, and there's binaries are almost always false. There's always more than one side, and we are actually capable of holding multiple truths around particular things in our minds, where our minds are capable of doing that. So I'm sorry, I got off the question, but
It's okay.
There are a number of people, there are a number of resources out there. I think Tony Evans, Pastor Tony Evans from Dallas, has done some of the best work. His book called Oneness, oh Lord, I forget the name of it exactly, but it's really about coming together with this sense of unity across racial lines. There's a wonderful pastor from Chicago named Daniel Hill, who speaks about whiteness and Christianity, and really, again, from a healing, Oneness Embraced was the book by Tony Evans, Oneness Embraced. And so, Pastor Rachel and the Racial Reconciliation team is talking about a number of options, even doing some foundational work. There's a curriculum that I'm familiar with and have helped facilitate called Race Literacy 101, which talks about our history of race in this country from a biblical perspective, from a faith-based perspective. So really bringing in scriptures and focused on educating and healing So I think I don't know that I have one thing to point to, but there's lots of opportunities to bring in other folks to talk about this and to do our own exploration. And I suspect that there are people right here in the congregation that have a perspective that would be wonderful to share and wonderful to hear.
I agree with you, Cheryl. I think you're right. Cheryl said, "Be the bridge," which I did speak to Rachel about. It's something that they used to do before COVID, and maybe can bring back eventually with Latasha Morrison. She's amazing. I've heard her speak on multiple podcasts. I love listening to her. And I love
the relationships are powerful. So having opportunities for people to meet each other, to come together. So I think that's kind of the things that Rachel's working towards is we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So hearing other people's stories, mm-hmm. lived experience helps paradigm shift, helps us get perspective, changes the lens so that we can see other people more clearly, people that don't look like us, people that have lived places and lived through things that we haven't. So.
And we can have some fun doing it too. So we're even talking about like a barbecue, a church barbecue or something.
That would be super fun. Oh, I would love that. I know they're talking about putting that big playground in the front and having like barbecues, and that'd be so fun. We don't have to wait for the playground. We can do it this Sunday if you want.
All right.
Sorry, I forgot what I was gonna say, but shoot, it's okay. Regardless. Oh, I loved earlier when you were talking about lamenting, and you said that was something that had been in place in your church. And we spoke last night about you don't want to have to look for a justice ministry when you need one. It's important that it's already established for you when you need justice, or when you feel that you haven't been given justice, or that someone in your neighborhood, or actually I would love. Okay, we do get that question often. What would it look like would it be something like discrimination? Is that like something where you would go to the justice ministry, or would it be, I really want to serve this community, or it feels like we could be doing more here? Is it more like that? Was that like just a really, really hard way? I'm sorry, that was confusing.
Yeah, no. I think I get the gist of the question, and I'll respond. But I really want Stevie to share what she shared with us last night, and the notion of why it's necessary to stand up a justice ministry before we need it, right? And that's a really compelling thing. So I think that this is something that actually is being created by Rancho Community Church.
Oh, I think so.
I haven't seen a specific position like justice pastor before, and I'm really intrigued by that. I don't know that there's a formula that fits about what a justice pastor, what a justice ministry ought to respond to. I do think that the frame should be biblical, right? What is the Jesus orientation towards justice? So I don't know if it's engaging in things that may already have protections out there, like labor discrimination, job place discrimination, or housing discrimination. I do think it should have connections to those resources and be able to point people in the right direction. I think that there's probably a place for that ministry to activate when there are particular concerns, protests, and I don't know what they look like in Temecula, but certainly when we were in DC, when I was working with DC Unity and Justice, and even our church in DC participated in faith-based marches around the racial tension that was going on, a couple years ago. We were, and it was all faith-oriented, and so activating the church, being a place that can activate the church beyond Rancho Community Church, right? So being connected with other fellowships, other ministries in the area that can come together and really create that space. Because I do think that justice is a place where we can orient from a unified perspective. We can connect ourselves across churches, across ministries, and be in a space of unity, no matter how we fellowship and what different buildings we sit in. But share your point about The need for it.
I think what you're referring to is justice pastor. Justice pastor might be something like a church would have like a bereavement pastor or pastoral care, and it's something that until you need it, you may not know why it's there. But you don't want somebody to start building a hospital when you're on your way to deliver your baby. You want to know that it's there. Right. If you need, you don't know what an oncologist necessarily is, or until you have a need for that thing. So having these things in place that when people do need care, we're all going to need care. There's always going to be injustices in the world, that things are going to happen, and that's in place, that structure is not being built while I'm in need of it is hopeful. And that's what the church is built to do, to bring the hope of Christ to people who need.
Wow. That was so good. I just want to thank you guys so much again. I feel like that's just the perfect place to end. It's the hope in Christ. And that is what the church is here to bring. I would love to have you guys on again. This was just so valuable. I can't wait to go back through and listen again. And I'm just glad that you're here. I want to say welcome. I know we haven't met officially in person yet, but I want to say welcome because I think you guys are just going to help so much with our justice ministries and foster care ministries and all of the good coming out of Rancho, just amplified in your hearts.
Thank you, Haley. It's great to meet you. And we did walk past each other on Sunday, but we didn't know each other then. But it's great to connect with you in this format, and we look forward to getting to know you and other folks here at Rancho Community Church. We're really privileged to be here.
Thank you for your heart and for your service.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I will post this. I know you guys don't have Instagram. Maybe I can figure a way to download it and text it to you if you want to watch it again, or share it with somebody. But wonderful. I'm going to put all the books that you spoke about. I'm going to put it in the comment section for people as resources. And yeah, I just want to say thank you again. And I hope you guys have a great night. And thanks for coming out to Rancho to do this for us.
So much, our privilege.
Thanks, Haley.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.